What if the first Americans were not pilgrims with their neat hats and the idea of a new world, but bearded Vikings with axes, dracars, and a dubious sense of humor? Imagine, instead of landing on Plymouth Rock in 1620 and immediately starting to plan Thanksgiving, the Americas were settled by Scandinavians 500 years earlier, around the year 1000, when Columbus hadn't even dreamed of his caravels. Leif Erikson, this almost Columbus from the Vinland Saga, didn't just give up on Newfoundland and say, "Well, it's nice, but I'd rather go home," but stayed there building houses, farms, and perhaps even the first sauna across the ocean. The paradox is that the Vikings did make it to North America. We know about Lonso Meadows, their little settlement, but for some reason they decided that fighting the locals and hauling logs across the Atlantic wasn't worth the trouble. What if they hadn't given up? What if instead of a short tourist visit, they had said, "This is our new home, let's unpack our bags"? This topic is a real gift for those who like to dig into history and ask what if. Think about it. The Vikings were not just warriors with beautiful beards and ships that looked like works of art. They knew how to trade, build, and survive in conditions where others would have given up long ago. In reality, their trip to America remained an episode. They came, they looked, they fought with the locals, and they went back to Greenland to drink mead. But imagine if Leif or his descendants decided, "No, we're staying. It's great here." If they had settled in North America, it could have changed everything. From who would have been the first to discover the New World to what the modern United States would look like. Maybe instead of hamburgers, we would have eaten smoked cod on barley bread, and instead of Thanksgiving, we would have celebrated the Day of the Torah with feasts and ritual dances. The irony is that Columbus would probably have sailed to the shores, where he would have been met not by surprised Indians, but by Scandinavians with pitchforks and a question, "Who are you, and where is your beard?" Why is this interesting? Because it's not just about the Vikings, it's about how one small twist in the past can turn the whole story upside down. Imagine an America where Scandinavian traditions dominate instead of English laws, where wooden temples with runes stand instead of Catholic cathedrals, and Europe might never have become the imperial machine we know. And most importantly, it is a chance to look at history from a different perspective, with a touch of humor and without boring lectures. So pour yourself a cup of coffee, or better yet, mead if you're in the mood, and get ready for a story that will make it hard to tear yourself away. We will plunge into the world where the Vikings not only visited America, but made it their own. Are you ready? Then go ahead. The Drakars are waiting. Shahiti. So, let's imagine the year 1000. Leif Erikson, son of Eric the Red, is standing on the deck of his Drakar, looking at the shores of Vinland, now Newfoundland, and thinking, it's just a paradise for Vikings. Forests are full, fish are plentiful, and no one demands to pay taxes to the Danish king. In the real story, he built a few huts in Lonso Meadows, lived there for a while, quarreled with the local Skrulls, as the Vikings called the indigenous peoples, and decided that Greenland was closer to his heart. But in our alternative reality, Leif doesn't give up. He calls his brothers from Greenland and Iceland, brings their families cattle and barley seeds, and says, "This is our new home. We are taking the ships apart and building something serious." How would it all go on? Let's find out. Without dragons and magic, but with a good dose of common sense and a few jokes about beards. The first years are a struggle for survival. The Vikings build fortified settlements along the coast, long houses with sod roofs, forges where they forge axes and spearheads, and even small berths for drakars. The local tribes, the ancestors of the Botiks or Micmacs, were not happy with their new neighbors at first. The sagas mention how the Skrillings attacked the Vikings because of a misunderstanding in trade. But here Leif shows a bit of wit. Instead of swinging axes left and right, he offers an exchange: iron tools and wool for fur and fish. The locals see that these bearded strangers are not so bad, and eventually conflicts are replaced by trade. The Vikings, by the way, have always been masters of adaptation. Think about how they developed Iceland or Normandy. So why not America? By 1050, Vinland was no longer just a few huts, but a network of settlements from Newfoundland to the Gulf of St. Lawrence. The Vikings bring more people from Scandinavia, and the population grows to several thousand. They grow barley and flax, raise sheep and goats, and most importantly, build ships to sail back to Greenland and Iceland. Their dracars are getting stronger, longer with bigger sails, adapted to the Atlantic storms. The irony is that while European kings are fighting over pieces of land, these barbarians are quietly settling the entire continent. They also bring Christianity with them. Leif was baptized but with a pagan flavor. Imagine wooden churches with Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, carved next to the cross. Local tribes picked up on this mishmash, and the first Viking Indian communities appeared, where children had names like Sven the Grey Bear. By 1200, Vinland is already a real power. The Vikings control the coast from present-day Canada to Maine, trade with Europe through Iceland, and even reach the Caribbean on their ships. Their culture mingles with the local one. The Norse sagas now tell of battles with forest warriors, and Indian legends tell of men with iron beards. Technology was developing more slowly than in Europe, but the Vikings were improving shipbuilding and metallurgy, and their swords and axes were becoming legendary across the ocean. In Scandinavia, meanwhile, they are perplexed. Where have all our brave men gone? Many moved to Vinland, weakening Denmark and Norway, which in reality have become stronger due to internal consolidation. And now a twist. When Christopher Columbus sails to America in 1492, he sees not a wild land, but fortified ports with dracars and bearded warriors who ask, "Who are you, boy? And where is your ship with proper sails?" The Spanish, of course, are trying to seize these lands, but the Vikings of Vinland are not defenseless Aztecs. Their archers, trained by the locals, and heavy infantry repel attack after attack. Columbus returns to Spain empty-handed and with a report. Someone already lives there, and they are in no mood to share. European colonization is delayed for centuries. Spain and Portugal focus on Africa and Asia, and England and France decide to try their luck in the Americas only by the 1600s, but face a strong Scandinavian state. How does this affect the world? Europe remains poorer without American gold and silver, no golden age for Spain, no majestic cathedrals built on Native American treasures. Scandinavia, on the other hand, becomes richer and more influential thanks to trade with Vinland. Furs, fish, and timber flow to Norway, and from there to the entire continent. Christianity in America has a different look. There are more pagan traditions than Catholic dogmas, and the Vatican is rubbing its elbows because it did not have time to impose its rules. And the indigenous peoples? Their fate is better than in reality. Instead of mass extermination, there is trade and cultural exchange, albeit not without clashes. Imagine a Mi'kmaq chief wearing an iron helmet and drinking mead from a horn. That's the new America. By the 1500s, Vinland was growing to the size of a medieval state, from Labrador to modern-day New York. Their cities are not stone fortresses, but wooden settlements with high stilts and harbors full of ships. The culture is a mixture of Scandinavian austerity and American freedom. Sagas sing of heroes who fight bears, not dragons, and jars, leaders, are elected at tings, where every free man has a voice. The irony is that while Europe is fighting for religion and titles, these savages are building a society where freedom and strength are valued above gold. And what if this really happened? Maybe we would all speak a language with runes and consider the drakar a symbol of progress? So what do we have in this alternative history? The Vikings didn't just visit North America, they made it their own, creating Vinland, a land of drakars, runes, and bearded farmers that stopped European colonization at its doorstep. By the 1500s, it was no longer a bunch of huts, but a strong Scandinavian civilization stretching from Newfoundland to Hudson Bay, with ships sailing to Europe, and a culture where Thor and Christ peacefully share a place at the table. Europe, of course, is shocked. Columbus returns without any gold, Spain loses its treasures, and England and France decide to venture overseas only a century later, and then cautiously because the Vikings are already ruling. Scandinavia is prosperous, trading in furs and fish, and Native Americans live better than they did in reality, although they are learning to drink mead instead of corned beer. But is everything so rosy? Vinland is strong, but not forever. The Vikings hold the coast, but they are not allowed to go deeper into the continent by powerful tribes, such as the Iroquois, who learn to forge iron and fight back. In Scandinavia itself, the migration to America weakens the old kingdoms. Denmark and Norway lose people and strength, and Sweden may be rising earlier than it actually is. Europe, without American wealth, would have been mired in medieval chaos for longer. No renaissances with luxurious palaces, but more wars for pieces of land. And what about America? It could have become a continent where Scandinavian freedom and local savagery would have merged into something unique. Imagine a Jarl ruling over a ting in modern Boston, or a rune fisherman on a boat in New York Harbor. This story makes us think about how fragile everything is in the real world. If Leif Erikson hadn't given up on Vinland, we might be living in an America where smoked cod is served instead of hamburgers, and the White House is a wooden chapel with dragon heads. Maybe the world would be simpler without the imperial ambitions of Europe, but with a stronger spirit of those who value the sea and freedom? Or on the contrary, colder and rougher, with axes instead of laws? It's ironic that we like to think of Columbus as a hero, but the Vikings were there first, and if they had stayed, we'd probably be drinking mead on Thor's Day instead of carving a turkey on Thanksgiving. Imagine yourself in this world, standing on the shore, holding a horn of honey, and a drakkar swaying next to you. Funny, but a little tempting, right? If you enjoyed pondering these what-ifs, please like this post. It's a sign that together we can spin the wheel of history and see where it takes us. And subscribe, because there are many more such journeys ahead, from the Vikings to someone else who could change the world. Let's figure out together how history would have turned out. It's more interesting than just reading old sagas. So, see you in the next alternate reality. Keep your mead ready and don't forget your beard.